Amit sir,
Yes,
if you
I
can
hope
hear
I
me, you
am
can unmute.
audible.
Yes, sir. You are audible now, sir.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to welcome General Rakesh Sharma ji, Dr. Jagannathan ji, as well as all other participants who are with us today to learn about the Galwan Valley clash between India and China and the aspects relating to psychological warfare surrounding this particular clash between these two Asian giants. Before I extend a formal welcome, I would like to echo the sentiment that were expressed by my previous speaker. We are also very happy that Red Lantern Analytica, which is a New Delhi based group of observers on China and on Sino India relations, has collaborated with our department to organize today's webinar, and not just to organize today's webinar but also to plan several other activities in future, hopefully in an offline mode, so as to sensitize the academic audience in our university with respect to the pertinent critical matters which impact India-China relationship, as also the rise of Chinese power and Chinese influence in Asia and the world at large. So we are looking forward to a set of meaningful engagements of an academic nature in future. And today's webinar is a beginning of this meaningful collaboration between Department of Political Science, the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, and Red Lantern Analytica. I have always been telling my students that we in our country have been quite lackadaisical about understanding China and China's role in the present world. More than Pakistan, it is China which presents real threat to understanding China in its internal as well as in external roles is very important. Last 2 years have been marked by several clashes between Indian and Chinese troops in different sections of the India-China border. Now, these are not normal clashes, but clashes which signify some kind of reorientation of China's strategic position. And we as Indians need to make sense of this changing strategic position of China. We are very happy that we have two outstanding personalities with us today. General Rakesh Sharma, who has been in the operational aspects of managing India's strategy and security. And we also have an academician in Dr. Jagannathan. So I am looking forward to a scintillating dialogue between us and also to erudite presentation from both these personalities so that our faculties and our students can understand evolving India-China dynamics better, particularly the geopolitical dynamics and also the dynamics surrounding the psychological warfare, which is part of today's discussion. So once again, let me thank Red Lantern Analytica, in particular Mr. Abhishek, Mr. Siddharth, and others who have made it possible for us to reach this stage of collaboration. And I also extend very warm welcome to General Rakesh Sharma ji and Dr. Jagannathan ji for agreeing to spare your valuable time and share your equally valuable ideas with us. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, sir, for extending the welcome address to our speakers and elaborating upon the importance of today's topic of discussion. I will now like to invite our first expert speaker, Lieutenant General Dr. Rakesh Sharma, sir. He is a strategic analyst and a retired adjunct general from the Indian Army. He is also a distinguished fellow from CLAWS and VIF. He is also an executive council member of GCTC and IDSA. I will now invite Dr. Rakesh Sharma sir for his address. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to Red Lantern Analytica and to MS University for inviting me today for the talk. And I feel it's a great honor given to me. I've had the pleasure of visiting MS University, I think 2 3 years ago, just before COVID, as part of a delegation of India Foundation, and we had a good seminar there. And it was a pleasure interacting with the students and the faculty at that time. Late Honorable Shakti Sinha was the one who conducted it. At that time, he was heading the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center there. So I have very fond memories of having stayed for 2 nights at the university. That's before the COVID hit us. So grateful to Professor Dolokia for the kind words that he's spoken to me about us today. Now, I've been in the army for 40 years, and now of quite some years I have been delving into academics for quite some time. So my Fauji tenure will make me more speak candor and frankly and candidly and without any so-called diplomacy. I will say my mind what I wanted to say today. Now, Chinese, much of the economic and military power were lost out in 100 odd years, which they call it the century of humiliation between the 19th century and the 20th century, when there were a large number of wars that they had fought, the Opium Wars and the war with Japan. And that century of humiliation is what they want to overcome largely and seek to become the preeminent power, global power in this century. Now, they see their objectives as kind of incremental in nature. So they have laid down very timelines by which what China wants to achieve some few things. It wants to become a prosperous society by 2035, with the Communist Party still retaining its preeminent as a preeminent dominant political entity of China. This actually implies by 2035 it wishes to achieve the status of a regional hegemon in the territorial and in the maritime frontiers, and with a robust middle class, a booming economy, and a well first-class modernized military. By 2049, when China wishes to complete its, will be completing its 100 years of independence. That's it got independence in 1949. In 100 years, it wants to transit itself to be the leading world power, and then, of course, complete with a totally a great economy and also a world-class military. But these objectives that Chinese have laid down for themselves are not nebulous. They're not kind of fanciful thinking that we can say, okay, we have fancy about it. They have been written into the Communist Party's constitution, and they are supposed to be followed in letter and spirit. Now, having made that base, I have been advised to address four major issues today by Mr. Ghosh. First is broadly what are the Chinese military tactics. Then talk about the PLA's, People's Liberation Army psychological warfare issues, events of the last 2 years is the third part. And also, I wish to talk a little bit about the social construct between the peoples of China and the Communist Party. Now, having said that, let me first talk about the Chinese military tactics in general. The basic tactics the Chinese talks about is something called active defense. It's a fundamentally defensive political strategic stance with sufficient quantum of offensive built into at operational and tactical levels. The PLA views protecting Chinese sovereignty and security as a sacred issue, a sacred duty. And it also sees that modern warfare includes preemptive actions. Preemptive action implying even before the war is joined, take actions even before that. So in modern warfare, PLA concedes that there is an unmitigated modern military operation, and an unmitigated military operation may win before a proper response is organized. So before the defender is able to respond, they wish to achieve many of the gains that they wish to do so in a preemptive manner. And they talk about local wars local wars in various conditions. The latest one being local wars in conditions of informatization, or local wars in the conditions of intelligenceization, as we talked about. Now, first and foremost is the issue of information environment, and I'm just talking about what has been gleaned through the large number of writings that the Chinese that we are able to decipher. uh, the PLA recognizes the importance of a digital battlefield, and it has emerged as a world leader in integrating cyber warfare and electronic warfare as an operational construct. Second, it has further expanded the theory of active defense, which I've spoken of just a little time ago. The PLS concluded that the most efficient way to defend Chinese territory was to prevent opponents to build up their combat power in the proximity of Chinese borders. And third, that the local war is the PLA's expression for, you know, regional conventional conflict closer to Chinese territory. The PLA views that this is the most likely situation calling for military force, and it has developed capabilities to excel in this environment. I wish to highlight one major aspect about Chinese psyche and thinking, especially of the PLA, and that's that in each and every issue, deception plays the most important part. Instead of being a peripheral enabler, deception operations are seen to be integral part of each and every operation that the PLA does. Rather than focusing on defeating the enemy in direct conflict, as most Western militaries, and including Indians, do, they have stratagems considering deception, trickery, and other parts, and perception-based efforts as the most important part of operation. So, deception is a fundamental thought process of war of Chinese, and they are considered to be a very high priority. They also have a theory of three warfares, and it's essential to understand what three warfares. They are designed to unbalance and deceive and coerce the opponents to influence their perception. And the first and foremost is a public opinion warfare. Opinion warfare is everyday warfare that Chinese do through their vast media system of newspapers, magazines, including those that they have purchased in foreign countries. In foreign media, they have either have shares, or they have outright purchases which we don't even know about, which Chinese own. So newspaper, magazine, television, internet sources, they all target domestic and foreign audiences. So psychological warfare is the second part of warfare they talk about. I'll build on psychological warfare a little later, but then that's similar to military information support operations that we talk about. It seeks to integrate a conventional warfare, like something what's happened between Russia and Ukraine now, and includes both defensive and offensive. And the third part of warfare they talk about is legal warfare. It sets up establishing conditions of legality for victory, both domestic and international. The most significant part of tactics of the Chinese warfare, as has come out in the writings in the course of last couple of years, I mean, I would say from last 2015 onwards, is that they talk about something called a system warfare. Now, this system warfare, it took some time for us to gather what exactly the Chinese mean by system warfare. It actually, as a concept, seeks to identify critical and vulnerable systems and components, and then degrade and destroy them through larger targeting of these vulnerabilities. The principle of system warfare is simple. It is to identify what the other party, other enemy have got vulnerabilities. What are the critical vulnerabilities they have, and the subsystems that they have, and the interdependence between these various subsystems. So PLA believes that if key of these systems are being declared ineffective, then the other part, the enemy will not have a will to resist them. And they include system warfare of all kinds, capabilities ranging from ballistic missiles to strike fighters to cyber operations to special operations. everything that we think in Indian side, which they think destroying it initially as preemptively, which will make our will to resist go away, that is system warfare. So if they bypass our strengths, if we are defending the borders well, so you bypass the strength and gain the combat advantage asymmetrically. So this is the they excel in exploiting vulnerabilities which they can gain from the opposing side, and thereby offsetting the strengths which are available there. At a tactical level, which is of course a part of the discussion today, the system warfare centers on targeting high value battlefield systems like the radars, or maybe the bridges, maybe railway lines, maybe airfields, command and control centers, a communication node, field artillery system, tank concentrations, air defense concentrations, even civilian infrastructure that supports military are all categorized into systems, and they want to target the systems warfare for this one. And examples are, for example, they will use heavy rocket artillery. You know, nowadays they have a RRF, a rocket force by itself, and to defeat and destroy radars and all artillery systems. An electronic warfare system to suppress and neutralize command and control networks, and then deception systems for hitting the leadership. So the the system warfare is the latest for the tactics that they have. Actually, in many ways, to describe Chinese military tactics is actually speculative to some extent, because in the last 5 decades, Chinese have not fought a war. The last one that you can say rightly they fought in 79 was the Vietnam War. So there are real world applications are minimal. Well, we learn what the Americans fight and how the Russians fight, but Chinese have not fought a war. So it is all through their writings that they come up with that idea. So it is largely complex and opaque to the outsiders. There are so many tens of higher level military organizations at the apex level, at the national command level, that you have to glean through their writings, and that's how we piece together what I have said here. The second part is an overview about the psychological warfare part of it. The Chinese psychological warfare, and it includes activities which it employs in information and media to target human thought, human emotions, and human spirit. Now, at tactical level, the objective of psychological warfare is to create a psychological condition favorable to PLA and unfavorable to India, reducing our morale and consequently our will to resist. In China, psychological warfare is considered a fourth warfare. Like we say, Army, Navy, Air Force, they talk fourth one as psychological warfare. It is so important for the Chinese. An effective psychological warfare campaign is considered to be the best trade-off, paying a small price in lives and material as a big victory as possible. So psychological warfare is considered to be a broader scope than any other campaign, encompassing not only battlefield combatants and soldiers and the military leaders, but also national strength, national economic strength, national will, national morale, political and social cohesion also. So psychological warfare is a soft kill. It's the use of non-lethal coercive means to affect a nation and of an organization's will, and they fall. It's a much broader scope than any other campaign, encompassing everything that we can talk about. And the goal of psychological warfare is simple. It is to control the enemy's awareness, his thinking process, so that our combat power is weakened. And their primary methods of doing it, this affect the psychology of understanding. What do I understand about the battlefield and the battlefield conditions, and what situational? This all is camouflage, concealment, feint attacks, demonstrative attack, ruse, disinformation, all affecting the mind of a soldier and their commanders. This is an information trap being carried out against the leaders. And the second one is psychology of conviction. It means that they place a high premium on deceiving enemy on their manpower and on their firepower, etc., etc. The third part of my presentation is about last 2 years. So you are aware that last 2 years much has been written about, and it's now known nationally well. But there, the border between China and India was not demarcated in the British times as well. There was in a treaty there was a line called Johnson Line, which was decided by the Britishers in 1896, and there was a line also by the British who are now posted to Chinese side called McDonald-McGregor line that was decided in 1899. And these two lines are based on two different ridge lines. The one closer to us is the McDonald-McGregor line, which is based on Karakoram range, and one which the British in India had decided as a frontier was called Johnson line, which is based on a ridge line further away called Kunlun range. So there, in between these two ridge lines is the area of Excision, which is the bone of contention between us and China. And after 62 war, this concept of line of actual control came up. Uh, Line of actual control, as I've always been writing and speaking, is an incurably faulty and flawed concept. This is largely because line of actual control had no line. There is no line made actually on ground, neither on ground nor on map. It is based on anticipation, perceptions, and the mountains ups and downs, such a high altitude, massive winds blowing there, snow conditions, ravines, lakes. No, it actually mandates that you have a proper line established, which is marked on the map and marked on the ground and known on the ground. So if that's not done, this line of actual control remains an incurably faulty or flawed line. And Zhou Enlai had said in 1960 when he came here that to ensure tranquility while accepting that he accepted that these two countries have never formally made a boundary, and there is a divergence of view on where the boundary lies. This the Prime Minister of China said. And Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, who was the NSA, wrote a book about 2 years ago called Choices, Making of India's Foreign Policy. He said line of actual control was described only in journal terms on maps and not to scale, actually implying that there is actually no line existing in that manner. So it must be stated that the PLA troops and came in contact with Indian patrols over the years were either unaware as to where exactly they're going. Every time there was a perception paradox. Sometimes the PLA patrol said, no, you are in my territory. You should go 5 kilometers behind. You should go 7 kilometers behind. The PLA themselves were so as confused about where the line of actual control lied. So, when Pakistan, just I give you an example, when Pakistan's line was sorted out in 1972 and the Shimla Agreement, uh, it was based on 27 map sheet, 19 mosaics. Each area was marked and signed by two generals. That was how the line of control was sorted out. And despite that, there is problem of line of control. On the Chinese side, there is nothing agreed on this one. That's why the problem here. And then thereafter, we had fought a war, and there was small skirmish later on in 67 also in Sikkim. Large number of agreements were carried out. There was a progress after Mr. Bajpayee, foreign minister, visited China in I think 1977, and thereafter from 1981 there were joint working groups made to start discussing the borders here. Rajiv Gandhi visited in 1988, and that provided an impetus to start thinking as what's the border, why should we keep fighting. And then there were agreements signed in 93, peace and tranquility, 1996, 2005, then again in 2012 and 2013. And largely speaking, I'm just going to bring the issue into a smaller perspective that to be truthful, a large number of face-offs take place because if I believe my line is there, so I patrol to that area, and the other party believes the line is here, so it patrols to the area. So there are clashes that take place, and the treaties, the agreement sorted out that when the two patrols come to contact with each other, they will disengage and go back to their own areas. And this was being done over a long period of time. It was happening. But by 2008, when the global meltdown took place, the financial meltdown, the Chinese thought they've come of age. Now they're a strong party here. They cannot be pushed aside. So the incursion into our territories increased by 2010. It was increasing. So we also redeployed ourselves, and we said, okay, we'll hold on to these areas. 2013, Chinese came for the first time. And then when we showed banners, they said, we are not going back. So it happened first time in 2013, 21 days they get sticking there. So we occupied some corresponding area. There was some discussion took place. Finally, Chinese withdrew. 2014, again it happened in Eastern Ladakh in a similar area. Then 2017 it happened in Doklam. So the issue was building up over a period of time, and as it came up now in 2020, And when Chinese came, this what Chinese did was the first time that what they have done. Firstly, they brought a larger force. The 2 division or plus 3 divisions, they brought about 100 kilometers to our border and put them there. As per the agreement signed, they should not have done it. It is violative of the agreement. They brought the 3 divisions, and then they carried out incursions in multiple places together. They had not done this earlier in last 60 years. This is the first time they came into multiple areas from north, which is Depsang near Dibyo, to Gogra, Hot Spring, to Pegong, so Finger 4 and 8, then thereafter to areas of Demchok, Chuman. So a large number of areas they did simultaneous incursion. So it came to light to us that this is not normal. And on banner dress they were not falling back also. So this was not, it's absolutely different. There's a larger force sitting behind them. They are making new roads, they're making new tracks, they've got artillery guns come close by, they've got some tanks landing up here, and they have made incursions in subsequent places. So we started discussing, we said, go back. And they said, okay, in Galwan, they said, okay, we will withdraw back. Then we went to check there. They had not gone back, so their problem took place. The fight took place where we lost 20 odd soldiers, including a commanding officer. God bless them. They fought like valiant soldiers, as always Indian Army soldiers fought. And now, subsequently, when this has happened, it is there that a discussion started off. There are 15 rounds of discussion taken place. There have been some kind of progress which has taken place in the form of establishing buffers. Buffers means, okay, area where there is a dispute, you go 2 kilometers behind, I go 2 kilometers behind. I'm giving example of 2 kilometers. It could be 4 or 6 also. It could be 500 meters, depending on area to area. So they withdraw back on the either side, and that area nobody will patrol. So kind of buffers have been created into number of areas. I can call them buffers. Somebody else may call them patrolling moratoriums into this area, so that nothing happens there. So 3-4 places it is already in place. There are 3-4 places where discussions are on and not progressing very smoothly, which means the Chinese don't want to withdraw and create a buffer there. So that's the situation out here. In the interim, Chinese have done great work. They've made whole lot of roads. New roads have come up, parallel roads have come up here. There are laterals being established. There are airfields being built in Tibet, also in Xinjiang. There are heliports being built here. There are railway lines being developed here. So, there is an intensive development being carried out in Tibet in the course of last 2 to 3 years. And also in similarly things progressing across to Nepal. They want to make a railway line to Nepal. He's also wanting to make roads to Nepal. And then also simultaneously rehabilitating, creating new villages, 624 villages all along the line of actual control, which are being put as close to the border as possible. And then they're forcing people to come and occupy there. They're giving them 4G and internet and what you name it, so that people stay there. So they're changing the character of the line of actual control in this manner. So I draw 3 lessons from this. First, President Xi Jinping in 2018 had said China will not compromise even 1 inch of their territorial integrity and sovereignty. India also believes in its own territorial integrity and sovereignty. So our perceptions stand firm, so do Chinese. Its territorial integrity is as important to India as it's to China. So in response to what the Chinese did, we did as much stronger activity across there to protect ourselves, to deny them, and not only in Ladakh, but also in all other areas processed there. Second, if you want to move forward to discussion, then I wish to reiterate that line of actual control is absolutely faulty, flawed concept, and it must be put to rest. There is a limit to where these agreements and CBMs can function. If there's a trust deficit between two forces, and today there is a trust deficit between two forces, they will be equal and opposite reaction to any action taken by the Chinese, whether it is deception or whether it is psychological warfare. We have the right to respond back into that manner. Events have their life of their own, and they cannot be guaranteed that what's going to happen tomorrow. And that next instance may not spiral out of control and create an international incident. There could always be escalation into what happens. And next incident may cause even more larger loss of life. So if this has to be avoided, then there has to be a discussion based on mutuality and not forcing the will. Third, in spite of tension on the borders, there has been some positive. We have been talking. the economics have grown to $125 billion trade, where China is the largest trading partner of India. No other nation, even if they surpass United States, and they are growing leaps and bounds. Having said that, economics must not let make us forget that, and trade must not make us forget that there are problems on the border front, and there will be subsequently larger issues that can take place. Chinese have fought wars with everybody who had great trade relations with them, with Taiwan, with Japan, with Southeast Asia, Philippines, Vietnam, all countries excellent trade, but they're difficult relationship also. So we need to be watching out on that. And my last part of the thought process is why a question which was raised by Mr. Ghosh earlier as to why Chinese do not tell about their casualties. If they had, then earlier said no, we had no casualties. Then after 8 months, they said we have 4 casualties, and subsequently now Western media saying they had 38 plus casualties. Right? India announced 20, and we announced 20 because we have honor of taking our people who are martyrs from the place to their families, so everybody can know where are they going. So the families do the last rites and it is done ceremonial. So it can't be hidden. This is the way India works. So there is a social contract between the Communist Party and the people, and I'm not saying contract in writing. They are based on historical cultural heritage, on the tradition of Communist Party and the idea of a well-off society. So Chinese Communist Party makes a great amount of effort to elevate poverty and to get people vote. But in an autocracy, it's not simple to keep the people on their own side all the time. China's had Tiananmen Square. China had great agitations in Hong Kong. China, in many places, in one of the writings one read, there are 100,000, 1 lakh kind of agitations take place every year in China, small places that are buried into news. It's not coming to light. So there are the autocracy, and the Communist Party is always anxious about what the people are thinking, and they're always worried that there will be some kind of a revolution take place, and the revolution will cause immense amount of damage to their to the Communist Party. To protect the Communist Party and the communist hierarchy, they want to make sure that the social contract saying all is well, we are doing damn good job, economy is booming, our PLA is superb, doing good job. So, or no, nothing negative must be brought across to the fore, so that people are reassured. People are saying, okay, I'm getting money, my standard of living is improving, and the government is doing a very fine job. So it's a thought process that, Confucius said once that people had the right to overthrow the rulers who did not abide by these contracts, social contract, or as people say, a rebellion is justified. Now the Chinese have to make sure that there is no rebellion, there is no protests, mass protests against them, and that's the reason they do not want to tell people that we had so many casualties. Then people will say, why do you have such large army if you not able to control your border? That is the issue of social contract between autocracy and the people. That's not there for democracy. Democracy is open society, a liberal society. We say and we do. We get criticized every day. The media criticizes the government. Government answers it. The public says what the public wants to say. That is not possible in an autocracy, in a communist regime. That is why they tend to hide the issues here. And I think I just about overshot time. Any more discussions on this one? I will take it on in the question and answer session. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and hand over to my learned colleague, Dr. Jagannathan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for elaborating extensively on Chinese military tactics. You have covered the topics beautifully, sir, which was backed by your on-field experience of being in the army itself. And I hope that all our participants who have joined us from WebEx and YouTube must have learned immensely from your address. Before inviting our next speaker, I would like to request our participants that they can post their questions in the chat box, and we will be taking them briefly before the end. I'll be now inviting our second expert speaker for today, Dr. J. Jagannathan sir, Head of the Department and Assistant Professor, Department of National Security Studies from Central University of Jammu. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Siddharth, and thank you, General Rakesh sir. It's good to see you on the thing, this webinar. I think it's a very interesting discussion when we are just going to near the 1 year of the Galwan things happened in the last year. It's a very maybe the interesting to start sort of a discussion on what are the Chinese military tactics. And after I think the General Sharma is Rakesh sir is the appropriate person to discuss on the tactics and the Psyops, since he was there as the 14 Corps commander, and he knows the nuances of the Chinese tactics, and he has encountered them many occasions. So what I'm planning to do, to justify my role here as a second panelist, is to sort of giving you the big picture about how the Chinese this propaganda, because they are known for this propaganda thing. They have this concept of winning the war without even fighting it. That we all know, and they never fought a war. Their soldiers are not battle hardened like our soldiers. But how are they are effectively doing it? But now, what is the status? This is what my little bit research on this topic, and being an observer of the Chinese role in South Asia, I would like to just share that few of my thoughts related to that. Can I share a slide?
Yes, sir, you can share your slide, sir. Your slide is right now not visible to us, sir.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, it is visible now, sir. It's visible now.
So ever since the Galwan happened 2 years ago, and what we have been witnessing with the mainstream media, we are mostly relying on this OSINT about these figures. It appears that there is not clear-cut pictures or the facts and figures coming out. But however, in our case, the Indian case, that we have right in the beginning of the issue happened, dropped off. We have been having this official statement regarding what exactly happened in the Galwan. Of course, because of we are a democratic country, and the government is accountable to the public. But the point is that whenever the government state comes, I'm talking about the Indian case, there are a lot of huge sort of criticism about these government figures in the social media. I think most of you have seen this, or you might have got in the Twitter or in the WhatsApp groups, walking these government figures, questioning these government statistics of what exactly happened in Galwan. To me, what I find that this is a pattern that which we have been witnessing, sort of the social media campaign against whatever the government does or the reveals, right from even the Balakot strike or even prior to that. Even Balakot strike, we have seen a lot of, there are a lot of social media tweets and other things giving a due credit to the ISPR's campaign, but the questioning the wisdom of the government. And this is a sort of, this anti-Modi groups or the clusters, I would call. They are again, they're picking up this sort of the security issues in order to sort of demean or the efforts. So that is the one challenge that we are facing, on that is like the entire social media, and some of the mainstream media is also equally sort of being influenced by the social media things narratives. But over the period that we got to know, when our case or our figures got vindicated from even the third sources, for instance, the number of the soldiers killed, the Chinese soldiers died, and also the nature of the Chinese engagement, the military engagement or advancement, where are they being placed? And there are a lot of campaigning also that they have built a bridge, and the Indian side is now quite trying to cover it up. So these are the narratives and the counter narratives. And also, I had also such followed that what is exactly happening in the Chinese social media. So the Chinese also facing the same problem, that trying to cover up their, or trying to convince that the domestic audience that our soldiers, they've not much casualties, or they're covering up the number of casualties, and also the nature and what exactly they are doing in the eastern Ladakh. So the China's domestic media perspective, now it is no longer being the control or the total absolute control of the CPC or the state. It is that is just a bit shaky now because of the exports of the overseas Chinese also influencing the narratives. That was visible when the question arose that how many Chinese were killed, and there are some pictures came that the Chinese soldiers being buried in some figures, and most of the overseas Chinese started, creating a campaign. It gone viral in the Chinese, and immediately those postings were removed or blocked. And so China finds that when it comes to India, I think there is also we cannot rule out the nexus between China and Pakistan, because ISPR is known for such propaganda, and uh, they have had a very good in sort of presence, and that was visible in Balakot when 2019 Balakot incident happened. They are trying to sort of create sort of thing that India's operation was not successful, rather than questioning credibility of the strike and also the efforts. So they are having always have an edge over when it comes to narrative and the counter narrative. But as far as we are concerned, that we are not that match to counter all the way to counter and the propaganda and counter those narratives. So the China's the how China uses social media platform and is that there it is again sort of reinforced or by the Pakistanis propaganda machine. So I think that is going to be a future challenge for us, and how we are going to. For instance, the 3-4 incidents I can say that during the even the post Galwan also, the way in which the narrative was dragged to justify that Chinese are have built a lot of infrastructures within inside the Indian territory. Since the entire area is not it's a disputed and not demarcated, only the claim is there. But again, the border talks are happening on the disengagement and restoring the status quo ante. So all this is going on, but this actually put a pressure on the Indian domestic audience, particularly narratives, and also indirectly the government is sort of distracting the government during the negotiations. This is what I see, that and we need to have a strategy to also tackle this sort of propaganda as part of the China strategy. So the tactics, I think the sir has elaborated very detailed, but I just see in a very very macro perspective that in Galwan is a case. This is a quote from the Sun Tzu tactics, that when able to attack, we must seem unable to attack, and that's what very visible. That when China is prepared to attack, and they show that they are not prepared, they are really prepared to attack. So many of that is to make the other side to underestimate their capabilities, and we should not fall into that's a deception. So we should not fall into that trap. The second point is that when using our forces, we must seem inactive. So when the forces are being used, and we should show that we are inactive in that zone, not dominant. And again, this is the other tactics which we can see in the entire Transvaal, and that's what we could have some sort of prop up in the Uttarakhand area, and also the Doglam, also some of the areas which we never anticipated that there will be a Chinese activities, strong activities. The third one, when we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away, and when far away, we must make him believe that we are near. And exactly this is what happening in the last and our media. If one follow the entire post Galwan thing, uh, there are many stories, planter stories, um, and also the social media platforms, and some of the write-ups appeared indicates that the Chinese are almost here and inside the territory and sitting there and build all the infrastructure, which means they are far away. I think that's what, because they want to convince that the audience, the government has failed, and then indirectly put a domestic pressure for the government of the day. It's just to sort of provocation. So these are the tactics which Chinese are following in the post Galwan thing. As an academic, as a follower, as a strategic expert, what I see is that the border issue which we have been discussing the Chinese. This is purely we have had a framework since late 90s or 1996, 97 to have a regular meeting commanders level to sort out these border issues. However, despite that, we should carry on the other business. But now what happens is that I think that this is what very interesting thing that's happening is that the PLA is now more aggressive and sort of trying to put pressure and the diplomacy, the Chinese diplomatic corps or the diplomacy seems to be sort of sort of working for the normalcy to return and maintain the status quo. So the PLA trying to change the status quo and create a new status quo, and the diplomacy follows to sort of settle down the issues and make us to persuade us to accept the new status quo which was created as the state. And that is the thing that which is we have been seeing, and this been amplified or this has been what do you call supported or by the Pakistan's Nexus, which was very visible. Some of the media, the posts, the pictures, and all circulated in that time. The origin of those posters were traced back to the Pakistani handlers, and there are many media reports on that, and which we have seen that. So, is there any nexus between Pakistan and China in social media as part of the Psyops against India when it comes to the JNK in general or Ladakh or the Ladakh or the Eastern Ladakh in particular? I would say my answer is yes, and it should be nipped in the bud. And I think we need to be very cautious and concerned about this growing nexus. And this is and how in the longer run it need not to be the social media only with the base is only in the northern part. It is also have a strong base. The fake accounts operated in the different names in the southern part. So when this was visible in the Balakot strike, when the attack happened, there was so series of mocking, mocking the government and false fake news, false information being circulated in the social medias, and based on that, some of the medias all picked up. For instance, even the General Rawat, the accident was also sort of diverted in the southern media, think that there could be some conspiracy, and there were few arrests being made for the sort of false narratives based on the Facebook and the Twitter and WhatsApp fake news, fake cards. So perhaps there may be handlers behind this in order to change or create a confusion or chaos to muddle this situation. So the military round of talks, all this because of there is a lack of the clarity on for the public domain in the public domain about what exactly happening in the post Galwan and what exactly the happening in the military, the series of military round of talks. But one thing is very clear, even the foreign minister's recent visit in the unannounced or unplanned visit or visit shows that there is no progress of disengagement by PLA, and I don't think so. There is a sort of pressure from the political establishment or the diplomacy or the foreign ministry on the PLA to disengage. So we don't know what exactly the disengagement plan is there, and the tactics still remains that hide your capacities and bide your time. So China seems to be buying time, and in the years to come, there are some reports comes that let's wait what Chinese are going to do in the summers. This was the stories which was circulated in the December and January things. And now when you have this Ukraine and Russian the war, the Ukraine crisis, again the Chinese capabilities being shown that even the social media that they also sort of emboldened to do it. So there are some series of measures they have taken on that. And this was also this also raised a debate, the questions that what if China does what Russia does it in Ukraine? What if China plans? How are you going to do it? How are you going to react to that? So the China fear seems to be like although the real, but somehow it has been exaggerated, and we even if it is real, we need to counter that psychologically. That would strengthen the morale of the forces and also the people that believe in that this is a sort of the fear. So India's counter strategy against China's Psyops I think we need to have a coordination, the planned strategy, focusing on the Sino-Pakistan propaganda on issues related to India. It concerns that India's national security or India's foreign policy. I think we need to have a separate directorate. To my knowledge, I have no access to any of these things, but they are happening, but it's like not in a coordinated way, in a big way. So we need to have a sort of a proper directorate to look after this thing, not only to sort of propagation for a propaganda purpose, also the how to counter those narratives and counter those propagandas, which is in the era of social media, it goes viral. And that's the point. And the we need to work on that aspects. Social media, not only in particular areas specific, as a whole country, that how we can plan a sort of a counter strategy on this. As far as the Chinese propaganda is concerned, in terms of ability to convince their domestic audience or the the people, they are quite successful in terms of showing that some of the pictures say showing that the soldiers are sweating and the sweat's frozen in the training, and pictures, and this went viral in Weibo. The people started praising, and some of them emotional got emotional. Then these soldiers traveling in a different location, but it was shown that these soldiers were going to Ladakh. So there are some pictures, and the Chinese firepower, the deployment, the pictures related to Chinese deployment, even the war scenes, some of the pictures, there's no credibility of the authenticity of those pictures, and it has been picked up by the experts. They are the informed audience. So the first level of target of this Chinese propaganda is to target those informed audience. Then it percolates down to the masses, and it is a natural thing that if expert says that this is happening, and the expert source is from this open source from the open source, and obviously the it will percolate down to the masses, so they will also believe in that. So I'll stop here, and thank you very much, and for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, sir, for extensively covering the topic. We have received few questions from the participants from our audience from YouTube, and we'll be taking those questions, few of those questions. And meanwhile, any of our participants who are willing to ask their questions can post their questions in the chat box. So we have one question to Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, sir. And the question says that China has not fought a war in many years, while Indian army is battle hardened. So is China a military paper tiger?
Okay, interesting question. Now, I stand by the view that never underestimate your adversary. And the point that I wish to raise is that when the Chinese have not fought a war, and there have been number of instances where we feel that the Chinese military has not come up to that expectations of a global military force. We must not anticipate or expect that there will be anything short of a full-fledged war in which their forces may do as well or better than us. So to push it under the carpet, it's a military force which is a large force. They train themselves hard. We have seen the training exercises that they do. They do it in super high altitude snow. We have the photographs to show. They take guns right up to such higher peaks. How do they do that? They do it only if they have the gumption. Where else can he fight a super high altitude snow type warfare? None of the countries that he has opposite him, from Tajikistan, Kazakhstan down to Southeast Asia, does he fight a snow type of warfare? Who is he practicing this wars for? Why is he building such an assets here? That's one part. We should not underestimate any adversary, even if it's not fight or fought a war. And I think calling him paper tiger is actually not right in this manner. We have to think of an adversary as a proper adversary. Having said that, we ought to know what the adversary is. Technologically, in many ways, Chinese have taken large leaps. They have taken miles ahead in many ways of technology, in artificial intelligence, in cyber warfare, in electronic warfare, in space issues. So there are now multi-domainal types of warfare which exist in the world today. And in many of these warfare, which is non-contact, maybe non-kinetic, not use of kinetic force, Chinese may have a singular better march. So we have to decide how to fight the adversary. Tomorrow, if a war takes place, and every armed forces, war is a historic constant. Whatever time we go back to history, wars have taken place. We have to prepare for a war against an adversary. In that war, we have to say where are our strengths that we must build on and we must take advantage of, and where are the weaknesses of our adversary where we feel our adversary is not able to do good work. Our adversary will also think similarly. My short answer to the question is that Chinese have not fought a war for 50 years, and they may or may not have weaknesses in some kind, but we must not push it saying that Chinese military is a paper tiger. No, when the war takes place, every soldier fights for his own country. We'll have to fight the war in that manner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your answer. There is one other question which is directed to Dr. J. Jagannathan, sir. And the question is that a large part of China's strategy is using propaganda to win a war without actually fighting it. Given the digital revolution in India, and which has made that internet arena in India as a sort of wild west, where do you see an Indian response in this information warfare in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think it's a very interesting question. That's what I have just mentioned that. See, the volume of internet users has been growing phenomenally in India's context, and thanks to the 4G and the geo connections, and also the vernacular media. If you could see the vernacular media's presence, and not only the media's presence, and also YouTubers. I think India last year assessment that YouTube has published that the India has the Indian market, the YouTuber market has generated more than 6,800 crores. That's the volume of the YouTubers here, and it includes the vernacular YouTubers, and they are much. And that we the new. I mean, the sitting in a Delhi that we don't know, or we don't know, or what is happening in this vernacular and on this subjects and these topics. But as far as the Chinese are concerned, and that is where the ISP are also penetrating into these vernacular, which we never imagined that how penetrative it is in the languages of the southern states, in terms of using this propagative tool, trying to create a sort of the different sort of disagreement with what the Delhi is trying to project, or they're trying to convince, or even if it is a fact that is trying to put it in the public domain, and it has been ridiculed or even mocked. That we have seen many cases. I have seen many cases of it started with the Galwan incident when it was happening. We could see a lot of such sort of comments and such sort of figures and the fake news regarding that. So that means that we need to be prepared to face that how we can, and it's in a we here we don't regulate the social media. No state government has some sort of any sort of regulatory policies. I think the recently Tamil Nadu has come out with a district-wise social media cell. For the first time, this is what I heard, but maybe perhaps the other states would have had, just to address this fake news and the fake gods and the propagate, the sort of creating the sort of the wrong information and floating the wrong information on this. So we need to have work for this longer term. The state should have Indian context, and we also need to have to closely monitor on the vernacular languages what exactly, and that's where the penetrating level is there, because they exactly know. For instance, in Punjab, the farmer protest, we know how the farmer protest has been carried out, the propaganda machine, and most of the operators, some of them are in Canada or even in the Pakistan. Those pictures being circulated and shared, and, in order to create sort of a rage among the mass. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. There is one other question which is directed to Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, sir. And it says that given that both India and China are nuclear powers, can a military skirmish turn to a nuclear warfare?
Okay, thank you. Let me say that issues of nuclear warfare cannot be casually spoken about. Uh, all nations, India and China, are rational countries. They have rational hierarchies. They understand that nuclear warfare is not a warfare alone. It has got uh, distinct and deep-rooted repercussions for future, not only to the societies that fight the war, it's also the repercussions of the international kind. If China has a desire to become a superpower of tomorrow, and which they have the desire, they will be crossing the American economy in next 5 to 6 years. And if they have the desire, then to talk nuclear and threaten nuclear, it'd be unbecoming of a superpower of this kind. The Russians are doing it for different reasons nowadays. So, firstly, I would personally wager myself is that to talk nuclear is not a nuclear war is not in the realms of immediate imagination. Nuclear is an issue also of deterrence. It deters, and it deters conventionally, it deters also by nuclear manner. So to say, to imagine that a skirmish will turn into a conventional war that will transform into a nuclear war, I think that's allowing the imagination to run riot. And nuclear itself deters nuclear. So any thought of any nuclear warfare will be also facing the deterrence of Indian capabilities of a credible kind by delivery means of all types and also by the warheads we have. So my personal wager, I would wage a thing on this, is saying that a skirmish, a conventional war, is well within the realms of imagination. The nuclear war, nuclear assets that we have and what our adversary has will tend to deter each other, and the Chinese will not like their own people, an autocratic state that it is, to be on the recipient side of a massive retaliation that Indian nuclear doctrine states, which we say that we will resort to to massive retaliation in case somebody uses a nuclear weapons against us. So I would say that we have to speak on nuclear terms with more circumspect manner and in more rational thinking. These are only in far imagination and not so very likely in the immediate future because of the deterrent aspects.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering that question. This brings us to the end of this session, and I will now invite respected Dr. Deepti Acharya ma'am, Assistant Professor in Department of Political Science in the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, for extending the vote of thanks to our today's speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you so much. And very good evening to all of you. And today it's really a very great day for me because I am getting an opportunity to thank two very distinguished people who have really, enlightened us about the strategies of China and how we can improve the relation with China, and not just improve, but how we can tackle the whole issue which are there, what India is facing. First of all, I would like to give many thanks to Lieutenant General Sir Rakesh Sharma ji. Uh, I don't know whether you remember or not, but we met in Baroda when he came, when he has listed, as he has mentioned about his meeting with Amit Dholakia sir as well. So I don't know whether you remember or not.
I do.
But yeah, sir, you remember I met Dilip Kataria sir, who has also invited
Yeah,
me.
he was there. You're right.
Yeah. And I would like to tell the audience that what you have enjoyed today, it is equally as we have enjoyed, sir, when sir was here for the offline event. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sir. It means a
I'm
lot
honored.
to listen to you again. And it was really wonderful. And to my students, I always used to tell that it's always great to listen somebody who is already having a great experience, the type of war and typology of it. The way you have explained it, it's beyond my expression. I can't be thankful enough. So please
Thank you.
accept my gratitude. That I'm really thankful for that.
Thank you.
And Professor Jagannathan ji, this is truly a wonderful interaction, purely scientific. I like your PPTs a lot, and I think my student must have enjoyed it thoroughly. How you have presented the whole whole situation. And the colors, because India was shown as in white colors whenever you were showing the chess in that. One was India that was in white color, then Pakistan green, and then red in China. So it itself is saying many things. You can have one presentation on it, which is really wonderful, and I'm really very thankful for you to come to join us. And as in the beginning, Amit Dolekar sir has also mentioned that we can meet someday offline and we can have even equally significant scientific dialogues where we can find something which can enlighten us, which can aware us about the issues which India is facing about its transformations. Uh, for me, I think it is the time to give a personal thanks to Red and Rantika because they have given us this opportunity to be a part of this event. And as Sir has mentioned already in the beginning, Amit Dolekar sir, that we are looking forward to have more fruitful events together. And I'm sure that I know many students have texted me that they have many questions to ask. But this is, I'm giving promise, Rakesh sir, on your behalf and also from Jagannath sir, that you
Thank
will
you.
come offline sometime.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we will have more interactive sessions with our students. So thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
so
you for
much to
inviting us.
all the
Thank you,
participants.
Siddharth. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you.
I sincerely
Thank you
hope
all
that all the
participants.
participants. Thank you, ma'am.
All the
Thank you, ma'am.
participants for joining us. Without your presence, it was meaningless. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we will meet soon with new idea, with new dialogue, and with new significance. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having and have a good day. Yeah. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I sincerely hope that all the participants attending this session must have learned immensely. And we thank both our resource person for their great presentation over this subject. And I will also like to thank our founder, Mr. Abhishek Ranjan, who not only established Red Lantern Analytica as a think tank, but also guides us every time during organization of such a magnitude. With these words, on behalf of Red Lantern Analytica, I would like to express our sincere thanks to all of you who have joined us today. And with the due permission of our speakers, we can bring this session to a close. Thank you, sir. Thank you.